At the end of March 2024, a film freeway email arrived in our inbox in Norwich, Norfolk, eliciting support for the 2024 Melbourne Documentary Film Festival being held in July this year. This immediately caught our attention as we were just approaching the first anniversary of our inaugural exhibition Not Just Bristol No. 1, held at the Forum in the city, which had as one of its features a panel dedicated to the lost girls of East Anglia who suffered the punishment of transportation in the 19th century. As amateur photographers, belonging to the Royal Photographic Society East Anglia Documentary Group, we had strived to deliver images which reflected what we were doing across the region, and which also included a desire to go international with a nod to Van Diemen's Land. Fortunately, we had in the Forum, the American Memorial Library to the 2nd Air Division of the United States Army Air Force, which hosted our film Slipstream 24, which has in its own right been submitted to the Chicago International Film Festival in October this year. As part of this learning curve for video production, we had made 2 smaller films based on our In Search of the Lost Girls project, which complemented our First World War stomp around Belgium In Search of the Lost Boys of the Royal Norfolk Regiment. In Search of the Lost Girls was an historical trawl through the Norwich archives held at the Forum and at County Hall. What we were looking for was the link between the East Anglia region of Great Britain and Tasmania, where we were fortunate to have a colleague who had attended the online Open University course endorsed by the Royal Photographic Society. During the course of making these 2 short films, on the one hand, we came across the huge miscarriage of justice perpetrated by the government of the day on the socially deprived, but, on the other hand, we came across the positive of citizens destined for a better life down under. Now, according to the Australian government, around 20% of the current population can trace their roots back to the old country. We very much doubt that anyone would voluntarily return. So please sit back and look at these 2 short films as we offer a common bond between creators in England and creators in Oz. Dear Mary, it has been a while since the constables felt your collar and you were last in Wimbledon, so I thought I would drop you a note after 190 years to update you on the current situation in West Norfolk. When you left the village, it had a church and a pub, both of which you would still recognize after almost 2 centuries, although the roof burned off the church 3 years ago and they still have not been around to replace it, and my guess is they never will. Fortunately, they have never heard of you at the pub, so you have regained anonymity again for sure in England. Or at least until you become a talking point at the Royal Photographic Society's April 16th East Anglia Documentary Group exhibition at the Forum in Norwich. It would have been nice to have made this the 200th anniversary in 2033, but, rather like you, I fear Father Time might catch us out. In your time it was probably an agricultural village, but I am guessing that you were probably not living there, as your husband appears to be working as a labourer up in Boston, Lincolnshire, and given you got nicked for shoplifting, I very much doubt that occurred in the one-horse village you called home. I left Wimbledon and crossed the Great Leas at Stowe Bridge before making my way up to King's Lynn and to the court where you were sentenced to be transported. The very cell in which you were incarcerated at that trial exists today as part of the museum in the town. A colleague of mine has sent me some photographs of Hobart as it is today, which I can compare with my eyes on assessment of the town, which dates back to King John and before. Looking at the evidence before me, I can say you are without question in a better place. You can really freak me out by posting a comment below, and rest assured that this is very PC, written by a man and voiced by a woman from somewhere in Seattle, I think.
19th of August 1800, Elizabeth Gurney married a chap called Joseph Fry. He was from Bristol. Elizabeth Fry was a philanthropist, and her connection with Tasmania is the Morley.
The Morley was a penal transportation ship which undertook in its lifetime 6 voyages to Australia. The third voyage had 121 solely female convicts manifested, and the layout and construction of the prison messes was supervised by Mrs. Fry. We have a further interest in this voyage, as one of the prisoners was also from Norwich, although allegedly of Staffordshire extraction. Mrs. Fry appointed Thomas Reed, RN, surgeon, to the ship via the Admiralty Office, and he undertook to write a journal. In that journal he documents the trials and tribulations of the voyage to a land which on the face of it was more exciting and formative than that left behind, whatever the pain.
So what have we learnt about the Morley? She transported Elizabeth Smith from here on the Castle Mound in Norwich all the way to Tasmania, and the question has to be, for her descendants, was that no bad thing? Here we have a city, hasn't changed much, and there in Hobart, a brand new country with the opportunities which it brought. We know Thomas Reed reckoned that transportation was not a suitable punishment for women. So overall, I think it's fairly safe to say, bad at the time, it wasn't a bad deal.